Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens, and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. Now, many of you may know that I was a teacher for many years, and so I wanted to talk to you about a kind of niche topic today that I think is going to be helpful for those who want to grow in their writing craft. So today I'm going to talk about the psychology of word placement. I'm talking blur words, how to create great sentences, and even using the shape of paragraphs, sentences, and all of that to create white space in strategic ways. Now, before I dive in, disclaimer that this is not something that everybody needs to know in order to write a great story. So if you feel kind of overwhelmed by the particulars here that I get into, you don't really need to worry about it. What I've found is that having this information in the background of my thoughts as I'm writing, as I'm editing, is something that is really useful when the writing starts to sound stale or the end of a chapter just isn't hitting right or things like that. So if you are ready to dive into kind of high-level craft today, then you've come to the right place. Here I can actually use some of the very specific knowledge that I've gained through studying English, teaching it, writing lots of books, etc. So don't feel obligated to go through your manuscript and change a ton of stuff, but I will give you recommendations for a couple practical changes that you can make that will have a big impact right off the bat. So to kick things off here, what is good writing? Why are we even talking about this? Good writing, and I've given this a lot of thought, is when the style supports and enhances worthwhile content. I added the word worthwhile a couple years ago just because there are harmful uses for writing. Of course, you can mislead, you can promote very negative things. So but what do I mean by style supports the content? The reason that we have grammar and all of this to begin with is for clarity of communication. It's to clarify what's being said. It's to enhance, in some cases, what's being said. So this definition can actually apply to everything from how-to manuals to poetry. The purposes are different, but the style is going to support and enhance that content for that worthwhile purpose. So here are some ways that you can utilize that style in more sophisticated ways to create different experiences. To define some of the words we're going to be using, blur words versus strong words. A blur word is a word that you want the eyes to just skip over. So that's things like prepositions, in, with, etc. It's not going to stand out. It's article adjectives like a, the, etc. You don't spend time looking at those words. That's not where your eyes go on a page. Even the phrase she said or something like that can become kind of a blur word. So your eyes just go over it. Yes, they take in the information, but it's not going to slow down a reading experience. It's only like the glue that holds everything together. A strong word can be a proper noun like Yellowstone Park, or a name of a character. It can also be just something more specific, like a toaster oven, for example. You don't need the exact kind of toaster oven, but it is something that is specific enough, interesting enough for your eyes to go there. It's not just nouns that can be strong words. You can have strong verbs like slithered or sauntered, swaggered, or things like that. You can have strong adjectives like drizzly, drizzly day. So these are words that your eyes automatically go to, as opposed to blur words, which you want the eyes to skim over. managing your blur words versus strong words is going to make a significant impact on the reading experience that your audience has. Too many blur words starts to make the writing boring. So those can be actual blur words like the examples that I gave you there, or they can be words that are very, very general, like walking, person, things like that, instead of something that's a little bit more specific. So if you're using blur words with some generalizations like that, your writing style is going to come across as more boring than when you have a mix of those and strong words to really draw the eye, excite the imagination, etc. So there are lots of studies. I'm sure you've probably seen the examples of a sentence where every word is spelled incorrectly, but because the beginning and the end are intact, you can still tell what is being said. This is just baked into our psychology as people, as readers. We pay attention to the outlines of things. This is true visually, this is true verbally as well. So if you look at the beginning of a word and the end of a word, you can usually tell what the word is. We are programmed to look at beginnings and endings. The reason that I bring this up is that using a strong word as the final word of a chapter, a sentence, a book, is one of the simplest ways that you can make your writing a little bit punchier. If you feel like your sentences are petering out, ending on prepositions or things like that, then instead switch it around so that your chapters and especially your book itself ends on a strong word. That will leave a better lasting impression on the reader. Beginning sentences with strong words can also give the impression of more athletic prose. I'm going to give some examples that you can see as I'm talking about this. If a sentence is starting to feel weaker or a paragraph, one of the culprits might be that you're just using too many of those blur words and generalities. So start mixing in some stronger words, especially at the beginnings and ends of sentences, and you'll start to see right away a change for the better. Now, assuming that you are using some strong words, what I've found as somebody who's graded thousands of essays is that if you use the same strong word over and over and over again, it becomes itself distracting. There's a term for this, daisy chaining, where your eyes kind of start going to whatever that word might be. So mix things up. You can use repetition to your advantage, but if you are going to repeat a strong word, be aware of that and have a purpose for it. So mindless repetition, I would say go through an editing and find not even necessarily synonyms, but just a different way to say that so that your eyes aren't going to the same word down the page. This is not as much an issue for names. I know it can feel that way when you have a character name that comes up again and again and again. Sometimes that becomes itself just a very simple marker for the reader to know who's doing the action, and it's not as distracting as you think. However, if you have a word like lawnmower and that is repeated over and over again, then your eyes just start following it and it can become distracting. If you want to repeat a word, you can do that with a couple of specific purposes in mind for the style to enhance the content. If you're trying to write about someone who is obsessed with mowing the lawn, this is all that he wants to do that day, but everything just gets in the way, distracts, and this is the obsession that he's mulling over and over and over again in his mind, you can reflect that in the style of writing about it. So you can use the word over and over again to reflect that kind of obsession that the main character has. If you do not have a specific purpose like that, then I would say mix it up. Don't use the same word over and over. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is a use not only for the strong words versus blur words, but the shapes themselves, the shapes of sentences, the shapes of paragraphs, and that kind of thing. So consider the shape of a long sentence with many, many words, maybe a lot of commas and pieces to it. Long sentences can be very good for enhancing a variety of kinds of content. Here's a list, a short and incomplete list of ways that you can use that to enhance your content. Long sentences can be good for a sense of abundance. They can be good for tiring the reader out, maybe to mimic some long journey. They can also convey a sense of breathlessness or anxiety, like when your brain just starts cycling and cycling and cycling and cycling around. That sort of run-on sentence, a long sentence is not technically a run-on sentence, but if you have a long sentence that meanders and harps on different things, then you can get across that feeling not only with what's being said, but the way you're saying it too. Short sentences, by contrast, can be used for different purposes. There's some overlap. You can also get some breathlessness or anxiety across with short sentences too, but you can consider if you have a few long sentences and medium sentences and then a short sentence, that can convey shock really well because your eyes go to that short sentence and really digest it and take it in a way that you don't with longer sentences. So it can convey shock, it can convey emphasis. If you really want to emphasize something, then that's a great way to do it. It can be a pithy summary or statement about what's going on or the mental state of the characters, because those short sentences are more memorable in a way. So if you can convey something in that short stretch of time, then you're able to emphasize it, say something meaningful about it in a way that you can't with a longer sentence, or it's harder to do, I should say. Paragraph breaks. Next, paragraph breaks. Paragraph breaks are another element of that sort of shape, right? We have long sentences, we have short sentences, we have paragraph breaks. Essentially, poetry is artfully done paragraph breaks. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but especially with more modern free verse poetry, much of what's being conveyed is doing so through the intentionality of breaking up the pieces of information. So in a similar way with prose, with paragraphs, you can divide the story into these not only manageable and logical pieces, but also there is an element of art to it. There are a couple of hard and fast rules, like different speakers being on different line or different paragraphs, but you have some freedom to break up paragraphs wherever you would like to a certain extent too. So yes, new speakers or main actors should get new paragraphs, but you can consider paragraph breaks like shots in a movie. If you are the cinematographer of your book, then when do we get a new angle? When do we get a wide shot? When do we focus on a different character, a different object, or a different angle of the scene? Whenever you would create a new angle, consider creating a new paragraph for that. It's going to have a similar effect in the mind of the reader as that shift in angle of the camera. You're not thinking about the camera as you're watching a movie, or at least most of the time, right? You're not thinking about paragraph breaks when you're reading a book, but these are tools for you, the writer, to kind of control that experience and what people are focused on and how they're taking in that information. Long paragraphs versus short paragraphs can have specific purposes as well. You can look back to the long and short sentences for some ideas about how to use long and short paragraphs. Long paragraphs do give a sense of density, so you can use long paragraphs to convey a couple of things that long sentences don't always do. Long paragraphs are often associated with description. You can put an entire description into a paragraph. When you use a lot of large paragraphs, if that's kind of part of your style, if you like that look, that can give a slightly, I don't love the term old-timey, but that is what I mean. As somebody who's read a lot of Dickens and Dostoevsky and some of these older, classic authors, they have this tendency to use longer paragraphs because there was part of it was just a stylistic preference, and some of it was the extended attention spans that readers had. So if you have a lot of long paragraphs, then you can use that to convey an older sense. So if you're somebody who writes historical novels, then you might want to use that just to kind of signal that you're in this older time. Short paragraphs are great regardless of whether you're using a lot of longer ones for emphasis or clarity. You want your paragraph breaks to be logical, to be intentional, to be meaningful as much as possible. Now, if you look at some newer works, especially in YA spaces and that kind of thing, but not exclusively, thrillers often do this as well. Often there's a lot of white space. You have very short paragraphs, you have some dialogue maybe, so there's an entire set of white space over here. That will make readers go faster. You can, again, control that reading experience because it gives the impression of movement, of action, of importance, of something that's easy to read if you leave all that white space on the side. Fewer words on the page means faster reading. Pay attention to the next book you read or the next paragraph you read, to some of these things that we do subconsciously to a certain extent as storytellers, but the more you can make intentional, the more tools you have to make informed choices for that next sentence, for that next paragraph, for that next editing run that you do. So good luck. The practical things I want to leave you with here, because I know this is a lot of information and pieces and all of that, is look at the end of your chapters and see, do you have a strong word at the end of each of your chapters? If you have big blocks of text without paragraph breaks, is there a place where you can logically start breaking that up for pieces of information or cinematography or things like that? If you have nothing but white space, is there a place where you want to break that up so that the white space can still have some power? So those are a few things to consider. I hope this was interesting for you. I find this kind of information to be interesting because I've analyzed literature for so many years. So let me know if you want more kind of high-level niche topics like this. I'd be happy to talk about them more on this channel. Until next week, check out my website, carly-stevens.com, for more resources. Like this video if you like it. Do not forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss anything on the channel, and I'll see you next week.